I still remember the way my mother-in-law looked at me that evening at Sunday dinner. She set down her wine glass with a sharp clink against the table and said, "Clear as day. My son deserves better than you. You've given him nothing but disappointment." I didn't respond. I simply reached into my purse, pulled out a manila envelope, and slid it across the mahogany table toward her. When she opened it and read page 7, her face went completely white. She actually had to grab the edge of the table to steady herself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Maya. I'm 63 now, but this story takes place about 8 years ago when I was 55. I'd been married to Richard for nearly 30 years at that point. We met in our mid-20s through mutual friends. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely kind. His mother, Diane, was a different story from the start, but I thought I could handle it. I thought love would be enough. You see, I came from money, real money. My father built a commercial real estate company from the ground up, and when he passed, I inherited the whole thing. By the time Richard and I got married, I was already worth several $1,000,000. But I never told him the full extent of it. I worked as a freelance interior designer, which was true, but it was more of a passion project than a necessity. I kept my inheritance private, maintained in separate accounts and trusts that my father had set up for me. When Richard proposed, I was in love, but I wasn't stupid. My best friend Lisa, who happened to be a family law attorney, insisted I get a prenup. "Maya," she told me over coffee one afternoon, "I've seen too many good people lose everything. Protect yourself. If he really loves you, he won't mind signing." So I had one drawn up. It was thorough. Very thorough. It stated that any assets I brought into the marriage would remain mine. Any inheritance would remain mine. In the event of a divorce caused by infidelity, I would retain 100% of my separate property, 60% of any jointly acquired assets, and the marital home. There was also a penalty clause. If Richard cheated, he would owe me an additional settlement. Richard signed it without really reading it. He glanced through it, shrugged, and said, "Sure, honey. Whatever makes you comfortable. I'm not marrying you for money." At the time, I believed him. He thought I had some savings, maybe a small inheritance. He had no idea about the company, the real estate holdings, the investments. His mother Diane was another matter entirely. She'd built her own successful boutique marketing firm and was incredibly proud of being self-made. She viewed me as beneath her son from day one. I was just a decorator. She made little comments constantly. "Oh, you're wearing that? Or I suppose it's nice that you have little projects to keep you busy." For years, I bit my tongue. I wanted to make the marriage work. I loved Richard. We had genuinely good times together. We traveled, we laughed, we built a life. I convinced myself that Diane's opinion didn't matter. But things started changing about 3 years ago. Richard began working late more often. He was distant during dinner. He stopped asking about my day. When I'd reach for his hand, he'd find an excuse to pull away. "I'm tired, Maya. I have a headache. Can we talk about this later?" Then came the small signs. Perfume on his collar that wasn't mine. Receipts from restaurants we'd never been to together. His phone constantly face down on the table. When it rang and he saw who it was, he'd leave the room to answer. I wasn't naive. I knew what was happening, but I needed to be sure. I needed proof. So I started paying attention. I started documenting. One evening, I used his laptop while he was in the shower. His email was still logged in. That's when I found them. Messages to someone named Jessica. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Last night was incredible. I wish I could leave her, but the timing isn't right. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. 30 years of marriage. 30 years of standing by him, supporting his career, tolerating his mother's cruelty, and this was how he repaid me? But I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I called Lisa. "Document everything," she told me. "Every late night, every lie, every receipt. Take photos of the messages. If he's stupid enough to leave a paper trail, follow it." So that's what I did. I installed a GPS tracker on his car, one of those ones that's technically legal for shared vehicles. I took screenshots of every message I could find. I kept a detailed journal of every time he claimed to be working late, but the GPS showed him at a hotel or an unfamiliar address. Meanwhile, Diane's behavior toward me got worse. much worse. She started making comments about how I'd let myself go, how I wasn't supporting Richard's career properly, how women my age needed to work harder to keep their husbands interested. At one family dinner, about 6 months after I discovered the affair, she actually said in front of everyone, "You know, Richard has such potential. It's a shame he's been held back by certain circumstances." She looked directly at me when she said it. I smiled and passed the potatoes. My nephew, who was there with his new wife, looked uncomfortable. "Aunt Diane, that's not— I'm just being honest," she interrupted. "Honesty is important in families, don't you think, Maya?" "Absolutely," I said calmly. I couldn't agree more. Richard said nothing. He just sat there, cutting his steak, avoiding eye contact. That night, after everyone left, I confronted him. "I know about Jessica." He froze. For a moment, I thought he might deny it. Instead, he just sighed. "How long have you known? Does it matter?" "Maya, it's not what you think. I care about you. We've grown apart." "You have to admit that." "Grown apart?" I repeated. "Is that what you call it? We're in different places in life now. You have your little design projects. I need someone who understands my ambitions." "Your ambitions," I said quietly. "Right. Don't make this harder than it has to be. These things happen. We can handle this like adults." "Oh, we will," I assured him. "We absolutely will." The next morning, I called Lisa. "I want to start divorce proceedings." "Are you sure?" she asked. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "Okay," she said. "Let's do this right. Gather every piece of evidence you have. We're going to need it." But before I could move forward, Diane invited herself over for lunch. She walked into my house like she owned it, looked around my carefully decorated living room, and said, "You know, dear, this style is a bit dated. You should consider updating. I know a wonderful designer." "I am a designer," I reminded her. "Oh, right. Well," she settled onto my sofa without being asked. "I wanted to talk to you about Richard." "What about him?" "He's been under a lot of stress lately. Work pressure. You know how demanding his career is." "He needs support, understanding, a wife who puts his needs first." She paused. "I'm not sure you've been doing that, Maya." I set down my teacup. "What exactly are you suggesting, Diane?" "I'm suggesting that perhaps you haven't been enough for him. Perhaps you've been selfish, focused on your little hobbies instead of being a proper partner." "A proper partner." "Yes. And frankly, I think my son deserves better. He deserves someone who matches his ambition, someone who brings something to the table." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Something to the table. "I see. Don't take it personally, dear. It's just the truth. You've had a good run, but maybe it's time to accept that you two want different things. Maybe it would be better for everyone if you just let him go. Gracefully." "Gracefully," I repeated. "Yes. You could walk away quietly. No drama. I'm sure Richard would be fair about the settlement. You'd get something for your years together." She leaned forward. "But if you fight this, if you make things difficult, well, you won't come out looking good. A woman your age, clinging to a man who doesn't want her anymore. It's rather sad, don't you think?" That's when I knew. Richard had told his mother about wanting a divorce. They'd probably discussed it together. Diane was here to soften me up, to convince me to accept whatever lowball offer they'd planned. I stood up. "Diane, I need to show you something." I went to my study and pulled out a folder. A thick folder. Inside was the prenup. All 63 pages of it. I'd highlighted the relevant sections. I came back and handed it to her. "You should read this, particularly page 7, section 12. She opened it skeptically. I watched her face as she read. The confusion, then the dawning realization, then the horror. This says, "It says that in the event of divorce caused by infidelity, I retain all separate property and 60% of jointly acquired assets, including this house. It also states that Richard will owe me a penalty settlement of $500,000. Her mouth opened and closed. But Richard said you were just a decorator, that you didn't have anything, that you'd be dependent on him. Richard was mistaken. He told me you came from nothing, that your family was—" "My family," I said calmly, "owns Harper Commercial Real Estate." Perhaps you've heard of it? We manage properties across 6 states. My father left it to me when he passed. I've been running it remotely for the past 15 years. The color drained from Diane's face completely. That's impossible, she whispered. Harper Commercial. That's worth approximately $50 million, last valuation. Though it fluctuates with the market. She stared at me. But you never. Why didn't you? Why didn't I tell anyone? Because I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I have. I wanted to know that Richard chose me, not my money. Unfortunately, it seems he's chosen someone else entirely. He doesn't know, she said slowly. Does he? He doesn't know about any of this. He knows I have some savings. He knows my father left me something. He never asked for details, and I never volunteered them. I smiled. But he did sign a prenup. I insisted on it. Lisa, my attorney friend, she's actually one of the best family law attorneys in the state. She made sure every detail was airtight. Diane looked like she might be sick. You tricked him. I protected myself. There's a difference. But the house, the cars, the vacation home, all purchased with my money, all in my name. Richard contributed to household expenses, but the actual assets? Mine. I took the folder back from her shaking hands. The really beautiful part is section 19. Would you like me to read it to you? She didn't respond. I read it anyway. In the event of divorce proceedings, if it is discovered that the party of the second part, that's Richard, has misrepresented the marriage or the party of the first part to family members in order to gain advantage, an additional penalty of $250,000 will be assessed. That's not enforceable, she said weakly. It absolutely is. I have recordings of Richard telling his mother that I'm broke and dependent on him. That's misrepresentation. That's enforceable. I paused. I also have evidence of the affair. Text messages, GPS tracking data, hotel receipts. Would you like to see those too? She stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. You're vindictive. You're cruel. I'm prepared, I corrected. There's a difference. She headed for the door, then turned back. Richard will fight this. Richard will lose. And the more he fights, the more expensive it gets for him. My attorney is already prepared to file. We have everything we need. After she left, I called Lisa. It's time. The divorce proceedings took 6 months. Richard tried to fight it at first. His lawyer argued that I'd deceived him about my finances. My lawyer produced the prenup that clearly stated I had separate assets that would remain separate. Richard's signature was right there at the bottom. He tried to argue that the affair evidence was obtained illegally. It wasn't. Everything I'd done was perfectly legal. The GPS tracker was on a jointly owned vehicle. The messages I'd screenshotted were on a computer we both used. The journal was my own personal documentation. Diane tried to help him, even hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. There wasn't any to find. I'd been faithful, supportive, and honest throughout the entire marriage. The only thing I'd kept secret was the full extent of my wealth, and that was my right. In the end, Richard settled. He got 40% of our joint savings, which amounted to about $200,000. I kept the house, the vacation property, and my business. He also had to pay the penalty clauses, which totaled $750,000. Diane was furious. She called me every name in the book. She tried to turn family members against me, but most of them had witnessed her behavior toward me over the years. They'd seen her cruelty, her condescension. When they found out that I'd endured it all while actually being quite successful, their respect for me grew. My nephew called me after the divorce was finalized. Aunt Maya, I just wanted to say, you handled that with incredible grace. Thank you, sweetheart. And I'm sorry. For all the years we just sat there while Grandma Diane said those things to you. It's okay. You were young, and it wasn't your battle to fight. Still, you're kind of my hero now. You know that? That made me smile. As for Richard, I heard through the grapevine that his relationship with Jessica didn't last. Turns out she was interested in the successful, financially secure man she thought he was. When she realized he'd have to rebuild after the divorce, she lost interest. Last I heard, he was living in a small apartment and working his way back up. I'm not happy about that. I'm not vengeful. I didn't want him to suffer. I just wanted what was fair. what I'd earned, what I'd protected myself to keep. Diane and I haven't spoken since the divorce was finalized. I occasionally see her at family events. She doesn't acknowledge me. I'm fine with that. People sometimes ask me if I regret getting married. If I regret those 30 years, the answer is no. Not entirely, anyway. I learned a lot. I learned about resilience, about protecting yourself, about the difference between love and respect. I learned that you can be kind without being weak, that you can be generous without being foolish, that you can hope for the best while preparing for the worst. I also learned that some people will never see your value, no matter how much you give them. Diane never saw me as anything but an obstacle to her son's happiness. Richard never saw me as an equal partner, and that says more about them than it ever did about me. These days, I'm doing well. I'm still running my company. I've expanded into sustainable development, which has been incredibly rewarding. I've reconnected with old friends. I've traveled to places I always wanted to see but never made time for. And I've learned to be more open about who I am. I don't hide my success anymore. I don't downplay my accomplishments. Because the right people will celebrate them with you. They won't feel threatened or diminished. They'll just be genuinely happy for you. I went on a few dates after the divorce. Nothing serious. Then, about a year ago, I met someone. His name is Thomas. He's a retired architect. We met at a gallery opening. He knew exactly who I was before we even spoke. He'd seen my company's work on several projects his firm had collaborated on years ago. "You did the interior for the Riverside complex," he said, approaching me with a glass of wine. "Brilliant use of natural light." "Thank you," I said, genuinely pleased. "And you designed the structural renovation for the Parkside building." I remember studying those plans. We talked for 3 hours that night, about architecture and design, about business and creativity, about our children and grandchildren, about past relationships and future dreams. He didn't care about my money. He had his own retirement, his own financial security. What he cared about was finding someone intelligent to talk to, someone who understood passion for craft, someone who'd lived a full life and wasn't afraid to discuss both the successes and failures. We're taking it slow. There's no rush at our age. But it's nice. It's comfortable. It's honest. Last month, my nephew got married. It was a beautiful ceremony. Diane was there, of course, with Richard as her +1. They sat on one side of the church. I sat on the other, with Thomas beside me. During the reception, my nephew asked me to say a few words. I stood up, looked around at all these people I'd known for decades, and said, "Marriage is many things. It's love, yes. But it's also respect, partnership, honesty, and sometimes it's also knowing your worth. Knowing when to fight for something and knowing when to walk away." I raised my glass. "To the bride and groom, may you always know your worth, and may you find partners who recognize it too." Everyone toasted. I saw Diane's face across the room. She looked away quickly. As I sat back down, Thomas leaned over and whispered, "That was perfect. Thank you. I'm guessing there's a story there?" "Several stories," I admitted. "I'll tell you sometime." "I'd like that." And the thing is, I knew he would, because that's what real partnership looks like. Someone who wants to hear your stories, someone who values your experience, someone who sees the whole you and doesn't try to diminish any part of it. I used to think love meant sacrifice, putting someone else's needs above your own, accepting less than you deserved because that's what good women did. Now I know better. Love means partnership, equality, mutual respect. And if someone can't offer you that, then the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away. That manila envelope I handed to Diane that day wasn't just a prenup. It was evidence of my worth, proof that I'd been smart enough to protect myself, strong enough to endure, patient enough to wait for the right moment. Some people called me calculating, cold, strategic. I prefer to think of it as wise, prepared, self-respecting. Because at the end of the day, I didn't lose anything. I simply kept what was always mine, and there's no shame in that. There's no cruelty in protecting yourself. The real shame was Richard's assumption that I was less than him, Diane's conviction that I brought nothing to the table, their shared belief that they could dismiss me, discard me, and I'd just accept it. They learned better, and I hope, wherever they are now, they're learning still. Learning that you can't judge a book by its cover, that quiet doesn't mean weak, that kind doesn't mean foolish, and that sometimes the person you've been underestimating all along is the one who holds all the cards.